think for me, it's a skill that's already inside me somewhere. Why? I have no idea. I sit there and write stuff and I enjoy telling these stories.
How do you actually become a better storyteller and then actually put it to paper?
The best thing to do is actually find content and material and writers that you enjoy reading, and then you need to spend some time analysing that.
Who are you actually writing to? Is it more the end user or is it more like the management level?
We spend a lot of time working with marketing teams. So obviously they are writing something with a specific purpose. Their end goal at the end of the day is to convince potential customers that they have the right solution, that they have the right software product or service. So we have to sit down and we have to talk to them and find out, who do you think is going to be reading this?
Okay, Stuart, welcome to the show.
Hi, great to be here.
Really cool. Today we want to talk about technical marketing, and I brought an expert in today's show, named Stuart, who is actually a technical marketer. Could you give the audience a little bit of a background, like who are you in the first place and what have you been working on in the past years?
Yeah, so my name's Stuart. I run myself as an independent freelancer under the name of Cording Consulting. My focus is on technical content creation. I've been in the electronics industry for over 30 years now. I studied electronics at university. That's how I got into this industry. And although most of my career I've spent out in the field working with customers of my employers, and I was working for lots of different semiconductor vendors, people like National Semiconductor, Atmel, Microchip, Texas Instruments, and so on. I was out there in the field a lot looking and seeing how engineers choose semiconductors, how they choose components, how they design their products, what challenges they have, how they get them to market. And so I've gathered a lot of information over the years of how that process actually works. And alongside that, one of the things that always came up was that the marketing team often came to me and said, "Oh, Stuart, you know stuff. Could you write us an article on this? And could you write us an article on that and add something to our blog posts and all this sort of stuff?" So in the background, I was starting to do all this content creation, and I really enjoyed it. I loved the idea that we could take some of those experiences that we had, some of those stories, and share them with other people, because I found them interesting myself, and I wanted to contribute to that as well. So I would say about 6 or 7 years ago, I started to move more into the marketing direction. I worked for a PR agency for a while as well. And 4 years ago, I decided, hey, what I really want to focus on is just content creation. And that's when I formed Cording Consulting. And since then, my main focus has been on video and text-based content creation for semiconductor industry, electronics industry clients.
Mm-hmm. Would you say that you're a natural when it comes to copywriting? Because I feel that's a skill that's very, very hard to learn. So do you think you were just born with it, or you had to learn it the hard way over the last years? How was it for you?
I think for me, it's a skill that's already inside me somewhere. Why? I have no idea. I sit there and write stuff, and I enjoy telling these stories, and I enjoy interviewing people and getting stories out of them so that we can put it to paper. That's how most of the content actually gets started. I have to talk to the experts. I have a certain amount of my own expertise and background and experience that helps. Obviously, I don't know specifically, for example, why a particular client is using Bluetooth in a certain way, or how they came about adding a particular module to a microcontroller, or the specifics of a silicon carbide MOSFET. Yeah, I know where they're used and how they're used. But obviously, there's some sort of story in there that they want to share. So I guess just a general interest in getting information out of people. And somehow or other, I just seem to be good at putting it to paper. If you're not, there's definitely a lot of resources out there that can help you. Lots of people who sort of share their insights on how to write stories generally. I think I was just born lucky.
Yeah, I see. When you consume these resources that you've just mentioned, Stuart, I feel that there's a lot of generic advice out there, like how to tell a story. Like, how do you actually become a better storyteller and then actually put it to paper? Like, do you have some kind of best practices when it comes to that sort of stuff?
Yeah, I think the best thing to do is actually find content and material and writers that you enjoy reading, and then you need to spend some time analysing that. So walk away from the actual content itself and say, right, why is this interesting? Why does this engage me? How is it structured in a way that makes me want to read it? What did they do at the beginning? How did they introduce the topic? How did they then go through the middle and sort of pull all the threads together? And what sort of conclusion did they provide at the end, which summed it all up in a way that I felt that this was a compelling story, a compelling way of telling and sharing the information that was being shared. So A good starting point is obviously news websites, just generally to find out how journalists put things together, because they're very good at that. They have to be concise and get to the point, in a time frame that allows you to read that story in 3 or 4 minutes and come away with some knowledge. So I think that's a good starting point. The next place to go is obviously to the trade press. Most of the trade press is online nowadays, so it's worth going and finding out how our industry does it and what our industry writes and how they share that information. So there's lots of freelance journalists and trade journalists out there that do that. So go and look at the magazines and find out what your industry is doing. And also then if you're really struggling, if you really want sort of step-by-step guide, the best thing to do is go to books like the author Anne Hadley is a good one. She's written some really good story books about sort of putting stories together, really sort of concise chapter by chapter advice on how to do that. So there's plenty of guides out there. And the other really key thing is to just try and do it. Try and write something. Give yourself a goal of, for example, writing a story in 800 words, 1,200 words. Give yourself that limit and say, I've got to get everything in to this small space. I can't wander off into the trees and explain the details of every aspect of the thing I want to pull in. Be clear as well about who you're trying to talk to. What do they already know? And what information will you have to spend some time explaining? Because otherwise you can end up explaining every last detail of every last thing that you know that you think's relevant, and people will drop out and get bored quite early on. So yeah, being concise, being focused about who your audience are, those are the key things, and just keep practicing and get some feedback from people.
I think about the audience sounds rather simple, but I think it takes years of practice, right, until you understand like who are you actually writing to? Is it more the end user or is it more like the management level?
Yeah, exactly. And we spend a lot of time. A lot of what I do is working with marketing teams. So obviously they are writing something with a specific purpose. Their end goal at the end of the day is to convince potential customers that they have the right solution, that they have the right software product or service. So we have to sit down and we have to talk to them and find out, right, who do you think is going to be reading this? Where are they in their business? What responsibility do they have? And what information at what level do they need to know in order to make a decision? Yeah. So if you've got a high level manager in our industry, very likely they have worked their way up the ranks. So they're an engineer, they know the technical details, but do they really care what all the ins and outs are of a Zigbee stack, for example? Probably not. They're just happy to know that you as a supplier are competent in Zigbee. You've got lots of projects under your belt, lots of case studies. And if their team decide to use your Zigbee solution, the team is going to be well looked after and supported until that product actually goes into start of production. So you can be fairly high level. You want to start maybe addressing some of the concerns that person might have. And that will be things like, is the support in place? Do these people know what they're doing? Do they understand the technology sufficiently? Do they support the tool chains and the microcontrollers that we have? For purchasing, what sort of price range is this going to be? Is this a long-term commitment, a short-term commitment, a one-off purchase? So those are the sort of things that you might be chucking into the mix. Whereas if you're trying to create the same sort of material but convince an engineer who's going to make the technical decision, you're going to be looking at a lot of other things which are very much specifications, code size, tool chain support. How good your documentation is, things that really matter to the people who are going to be working with your solution on day-to-day business, and integrating it with lots of other things. It's just one of many, many things that they have to do in order to make their product work.
Yeah, I see. That kind of assumes that when you work with a marketing team, most of the time they have kind of a positioning or messaging document that kind of explains what personas they are targeting and what they think, what they feel. But if you start from scratch, maybe you build your own agency, maybe you don't know who you're writing for, that kind of assumes that you need some sort of emotional intelligence to understand their pains, their needs, and so on and so forth. Like, how would you go about that? Would you actually conduct interviews yourself then, if you have actually absolutely no background in the personas?
Yeah, I think if you're entering a B2B marketing team for the first time, maybe if you've got marketing background, you come from B2C, for example. If you're coming into B2B, it's very important that you start to gain an appreciation for the audience that you're talking to and the type and style of material and information that they want from suppliers in order to make a decision. I think one of the key things to do is remember that there is B2B selling is all about a one to team communication. And there is a team of people out there, a group of decision makers who will decide whether your solution or someone else's solution is the right one for them. So you've got people like engineers. They want to sort of tick off all their requirements list. Is the voltage correct? Is the current draw correct? Is the certification in place? Is the tool chain and the software there, and all these sort of things? Whereas elsewhere, there's in the management structure, there'll be some other person saying, well, yeah, if we work with these people, we think we have a higher chance of success because the support infrastructure's there, the payment terms are good, the price is right. This looks like a long-term solution that we'll be able to use over the next 3 or 4 years for the projects we have upcoming. So all of these people have different ideas. So if you're new into a B2B marketing role and you're looking at like, how are we going to figure out all these personas? The best thing you can do, the best first step is actually to talk to your team. Go and talk to the engineers, go and talk to the salespeople, go and talk to what we call field application engineers. Those are the people that help the customers in the field to actually solve their problems on the bench. They're the roaming help, as it were, and find out about how some of the projects came to fruition. What were the different types of people asking? The project managers, the purchasers, the management team, the CEO even, and then the engineers and technicians. Talk to all of those people and try to understand what their main concerns are in your domain at your company, because they're all going to be slightly different. So that's definitely one way of doing it. If possible, my recommendation, and I don't think it's done anywhere near enough, is actually go out with a sales team, join some sales calls and find out what things are being discussed. And even if you're not technical, you'll get an idea of what it's about. And you can then afterwards do an analysis with your team and say, right, they talked about this, they talked about the other. I didn't understand what those technical things were. Can you just explain what they are and why they're so important for us and for our customer base, so that you actually get an understanding for that. Otherwise, I mean, the basic easy bit to do is to say, right, engineers are technical people. They will want to know the technical ins and outs and have a tick list and have that all filled out. Higher level people will be worried more about general things like markets, costs, long-term support, and how they will be, whether this solution will support them for their long-term strategies and the company direction in general. So that's always a good starting point. And there's good books out there on sort of technical marketing to engineers as well. So they have good sort of starting point personas that you can use.
Absolutely. That's super insightful. How do you then define effective content? Like once you've put it out there, like what metrics are you looking at?
Well, I'll be honest that I don't get a lot of feedback on the metric side of the content that I write. Most of the content I write is written for a particular client, and then they go out and use it. And so sort of like their insights and how much insight they have is a bit limited. They don't tend to share that back with me. I think though that it all depends on where you're putting it and what stuff you have in place. And I say, let's be fair. The majority, I think, of B2B business marketing teams do not have a great handle on their analytics and their data. Yeah, so they're basically putting stuff out there and just hoping it works. And to a degree, that is okay. I think if you're creating content which is authentic, which answers the questions that your audience have, that allows the person reading it to have another little jump in trust with you, then you're on the right path. And we have to remember that the B2B buying process typically takes months to years before something actually happens. So somebody might see you at a trade fair, then they might go on your website and read a blog, then they might read an article in a trade magazine, then they might be back on the website looking for some documentation, they might ask a support question. So there's all these steps. And I think if you make sure that all of those steps, every time the person reads it going, yeah, my trust in this supplier has grown a bit over the last time I engaged with them, then generally you're on the right path. But obviously that's not measurable. I think if you do have sort of analytics in place, what you want to be doing is trying to understand how many people have read it. So if it's your own website, you can track how many times people have actually come and read a blog post. If you're then promoting that blog post, there's analytics on, for example, LinkedIn, so you can see how many people have clicked to go and read it. So with that, if you do once you've written one blog, you obviously need to do several social media posts to promote it. You can then go and see, right, which social media posts performed better or worse from an analytics point of view. and you can also relate that back to the traffic you see on the website itself. So there are ways and means of doing that. And I think, especially for small to medium-sized businesses where, you don't have all the tools, you don't have all the integrations, and maybe it's difficult to pull all the numbers from different places, my advice is always just to look at trends. If you've got, say, 30 viewers a week on a particular blog post, which is quite likely, the analytics is probably not 30 people, it's probably double or triple that, because loads of cookies and things, people refuse to be tracked. So just as long as you're getting 30 today as numbers out of your analytics system, your goal should be to say, right, we want to see a growth of 10%, of 15%, of 50%, month on month, year on year, whatever it might be, because that is, core to our sales pitch at the minute. And we're doing these other things, LinkedIn, YouTube, Twitter posts, promoting things with advertisers, promoting things through our third-party channels. We're doing all these things. We should see an uptick here, and actually take the time to be a bit more data-driven.
I see. According to you, Stuart, how do you define a successful content strategy, including all the repurposing aspect, right? Like, do you have kind of a checklist you go through every time, or is it more like you already internalized what you have to do to make a strategy successful?
I think the key thing is to be clear about what you want to communicate. That's the starting point. So it doesn't really matter when it is, but sometime in the year you should sit down and make a plan as to what are the key 3, 4, 5 things that we want to be talking about or saying. And that's assuming you're a sort of small to medium-sized company with a handful of products and services. Yeah. So there's got to be something going on in the market. There's a reason for your product existing. So sit down and figure out what those key headline stories are. There might be a particular, a growth in battery electric vehicles, and you're doing chargers. So that might be one thing. There might be a government initiative around simplifying paying for charging of vehicles. So that might be another topic you have. There could be also some concerns about vandalism of electric vehicle chargers, and you might have a particularly robust solution. So think about what those things are. And I think that's the starting point. And then from there, what you really want to do, and I think the thing that I learned working in a PR agency, the most important thing is repurposing. Try to start with some content which is meaty, which is big, which is full of information, or at least get all that information together. And then over time, continuously try to repurpose all those things. So if you start with a white paper, that's typically sort of 4 to 6 pages, lots of information, some statistics, background, solutions, approaches, alternatives, all of that sort of stuff with some nice diagrams. From there, you can create 2 or 3 trade articles for the press. Each trade article can be translated. So all of a sudden, you've got maybe 9 trade articles from one white paper. Then all those nice diagrams you can use for Instagram, for Twitter, LinkedIn. So you've got some nice infographic information maybe. You might want to do an interview with an expert. You can transcribe that. You can then use that as a blog post. So all the time, take that each big idea that you have, and sort of make a list of all the different types of content that could drop out of it, and see how much you can squeeze out of it. It's really like an orange. You just got to squeeze it and squeeze it and squeeze it until every last drop comes out.
I feel like a lot of companies are actually not thinking about that. They're just seeing this repurposing thing as this kind of annoying thing that they know they have to do, but they actually postpone it as long as they actually have no content anymore. So I think there was some good strategy.
I think this is sort of a bit worrying, really. If let's just look at a society for a second. You'll have friends and people that you know. When you go and see them, they have very little to say, and it's you'll sit there for 10, 15 minutes, and the conversation will sort of peters out and comes to an end, and you think there must be more to this person's life than just that short period of time. And yet there's other people, and you just can't stop them from talking, and it's very difficult to even get out of a conversation with them, because they just talk endlessly. And obviously, what you want is to find a nice balance. What you want to find is people who have lots of things to say in various ways and topics, are also listening to you as well, and understanding where you're coming from and appreciating your contribution to this conversation. And I think companies should also, marketing teams, the content side of it, should also see themselves in the same context. You want to be in a position to be able to always have something to say every week on social media, on your YouTube channel, on your blog post, on your newsletter, whatever it might be. You always want something to say. The worst thing to be is a marketing person and not know what to put in the newsletter, or skip one because you just don't have anything, or your social media posts peter out because you don't have anything these weeks. And that's such a shame, because all of these companies, they solve problems, they help people all the time. You want to be that interesting person in the room, and obviously make use of things like case studies, talking to customers, finding out which projects are running, which ones are successful, why are they successful, and can I use that to continue the conversation and share that with people on as part of my content marketing strategy.
Yeah, I feel like it sounds super simple, but I think the trick in marketing really is to take as much mental capacity of someone as possible, so that when they run into a problem, they think about your solution in the first place. So it doesn't matter which
Exactly.
company it is. I think you may have to make sure that along the way, along the customer journey or the prospect journey, whatever you might want to call it, you have, like, as you said, newsletter, blog posts, white papers, a podcast potentially. And I think a lot of people actually don't think about that journey,
Yeah.
like actually taking a lot of mental capacity.
Yeah, I think that's the important thing, is sort of like those what they call water cooler moments in the US, and sort of like the coffee room, maybe more here in Europe, and also project meetings. So how do these projects happen, and how do they occur? What comes out of them? When you're building coffee machines, okay, and you're working your coffee machine platform. This platform that you've developed will cover you for the next 4 or 5 years. There'll be a couple of upgrades. The casing will change slightly. The user interface might be improved, but at some point, that platform is going to be finished, and the team is going to start working on the next platform. That means maybe a newly designed pump and heater system, a newly designed control system with electronics. There'll be a decision made somewhere whether we're going to have a new, more fancy display with better graphics, meaning we need more performance from our processor. We might have a touch screen or a different type of touch interface that we've not used before. All sorts of bits and pieces. Now, engineers are naturally inquisitive. So when they're at exhibitions, they're going to be in trade fairs, they're going to be walking around and finding out who's doing what, and what they have. And again, sort of like sounding out the things for the future. Because really what engineers want to do when it comes to the next team meeting is they're sitting, standing by the water cooler, or chatting over coffee. There is a bit of rivalry. They do want to sort of show their technical muscles, as it were. And they want to share what they've learned, and what alternative solutions to the problem that they're currently facing could be. So this is why marketing is a long-term issue in B2B, especially for B2B. And brand building is important, which is seems to be forgotten completely. It's all about, I have this product, come and buy it when you're ready. But you need to be, you need to have those brands in people's brains, those B2B brands, so as that when the next meeting comes up and they go, oh, we're reviewing the display for our product. We're doubling the resolution, and going for a full color TFT, and we're going to have some fancy graphics. You're there and you're able to say, oh, I was at a trade fair, I was reading about something online. These are some ways we could do that. There's a library available for the processing platform we've currently invested all our time and energy in, so it's easy to integrate. We could do a demo project and start doing some prototypes, just to prove that point. And that's how solutions are chosen. That's how components are selected and get into new products. And so you want to make sure that when that moment comes, which you can't define, you don't know when that's going to be, that you're front of mind.
Absolutely. Over the last year, Stuart, can you give the listeners maybe some tips if they want to delve into this kind of field of technical marketing, whether they have an engineering background or not? Doesn't really matter right now. Do you have some kind of your top 3 or top 5 tips to become a better technical marketer?
Oh, that's that's very challenging. I think I personally think it's very difficult to be successful in sort of technical marketing if you're not already inside the industry. So it would require you to somehow be involved in the industry. What I've found is lots of PR agencies, for example, they can be a good springboard. So if you're not really sure as to what it is you want to do, and how with your career in marketing, and maybe B2C seems too fleeting, too short-termism, and isn't really floating your boat, and you think, oh, B2B marketing might be a better step, it's worth considering a role at a PR agency, because then you get to see lots of different clients across lots of different industries. And in my experience, a lot of old colleagues of mine have made sort of then a jump from a PR agency to the B2B marketing team of a client that they've looked after over many years, because they sort of found the team and they found the organization and the company and the technology that they're interested in. So I think that's a good way of doing it. Otherwise, I think you're always at the minute better off going to a larger organization that has a good team and is already doing good marketing. So the challenge, I think, with smaller organizations, unfortunately, my experience is that marketing is something that isn't actually funded with an annual budget in some cases, which is very worrying in many cases. So if there's no money there, then you've got nothing to spend. You've got no advertising budget. You might not even be doing Google ads or LinkedIn advertising or anything like that. So you're not going to learn very much if the most informed person in the room about marketing is you. Who are you going to learn from? You might be good at marketing. You might understand all the buttons to press and all the things to do, but you'll be struggling because you don't want to do in the contents of B2B marketing, and you might not actually have the money and the financing in place to do all the things you do. You can't write all the content yourself. You're going to need some help. Many companies rely on their internal engineers to do that. They don't have the time. They are not writers. I've seen some atrocious material come my way from engineers, unfortunately. They wrote it in good faith. They put a lot of time and energy into it. They've done their research. You can see that. But when you read it as a reader, it's just not compelling, and it offers meanders and wanders all over the place, and doesn't actually do what a piece of content needs to do, which is sort of explain how a problem is solved, explains your value add as a supplier to potential customers. So definitely look out there for people you think do B2B marketing well. Mostly, unfortunately, larger entities, you'll need to attach yourself to one of them to get some experience from a large multinational, probably, just to get some feeling, and then maybe sort of branch out from there later in your career into a sort of small, medium-sized business where you feel you can actually do something, and they actually want to make proper use of your B2B marketing skills.
That makes a lot of sense, Stuart. Thanks so much for the insights. I like that you talked about the engineers delivering atrocious material to you. I was wondering, what are they getting wrong? Are they too deep into the technical details and don't think about the actual value, but they just list feature over feature over feature? Or what do you think they get wrong most of the time, especially engineers?
Yeah, I think the biggest challenge for most engineers is this need to be 100% accurate. They don't want any holes punched in what it is they produced. In the same way, they tackle it probably the same way as they tackle the products that they're designing for manufacture, which is noble, but it doesn't need to be that watertight. You don't need to explain where every aspect of the information has come from. As an example, there was a piece that I received that one of my clients wasn't very happy with. One of their engineers had written it, and they were really pleased that this person had taken the time to write it. And I can't remember the core of the topic was something along the line of power supplies, but somewhere along the line there was this need to understand quartz and oscillations and signals generated by quartz. And it went on to this tangent all about cutting quartz and the frequency and all this fantastic information. But all of a sudden, 50% of the content was all about quartz and had actually nothing to do, or very little to do, with the overall topic of the article. In other material I've seen, you get diagrams where every single last a graph where every single last parameter is shown, and the timing between this, and all of these sort of scientific type variables are listed, the sort of things that you'd expect to find in a paper, for a journal. And that's just too much detail when we're consuming information just on a day-to-day basis, let alone if it's marketing. There's only so much information that my brain can take in, and if I see a diagram where 100 different parameters are all listed and formulas and all these things, and I don't understand them, it's a turn off, and I then walk away from it because it's just too complicated. So I think really you need to try and make it simple as possible. A good structure, in fact, is to start with thinking about just generally what it is you're talking about, who you're talking to, and then trying to draw all of those threads in the initial stage. If you're talking about Bluetooth, most engineers will know what Bluetooth is, for example. They've used it on their phone. They know there's pairing, there's pin numbers involved. Those who've actually used Bluetooth in an engineering project will actually know something a bit more than that. But there's an opportunity at the beginning then to just pick everybody up and draw them towards one particular aspect. And let's say that's audio over Bluetooth. So once you've picked up everybody in a large audience in the first couple of paragraphs, then you're going to start to focus in on your topic and your expertise, audio over Bluetooth. You might go in the history of it, how it's actually implemented, some of the challenges that arise when you're trying to use audio and Bluetooth. And then in sort of like the last third of the article, that's when you're going to start to bring in your solution. And you're not going to say, we've got the best, this is everything we do, this is all our secret sauce. You might just guide people in the direction, say, look, these are the ways that you can actually fix that. We have a solution that does that. We've tested it out in lots of different situations, and then sort of summarize it all from there. And you have to remember that this one content piece should be part of a longer strategy. So, I think that's the key thing. Don't get too technical. Don't put too much information in. And, if we go back to what we started with, if you know who your audience is and who you're writing for, it makes it much, much easier to avoid adding too much information and background.
Yeah, I was wondering, when do you think is a good way? Let's say you work on a content piece, a blog, for example, Stuart. When do you think is a good time to hand it over to the client? Is it when you cannot add more, or when you cannot take away more words without changing the meaning or the essence of the piece too much? Like, how do you approach this?
Yeah,
this bit.
To be honest, I think the most important bit, which we haven't talked about, is actually agreeing with the client what you're going to write before you've even written it. So I always go through a briefing process. The key part of the briefing process for me is to define the 3 things that you want the reader to be able to recall after they've read it. So what I do is, again, come back to that water cooler or coffee room moment. You want to have a piece of content that's so interesting and so engaging. 2 engineers meet in a coffee room, and one of them says, "Oh, I was just reading this piece of information about Bluetooth audio from company X, and I didn't realize that is a challenge, or that problem has been solved." So I think that's the first most important thing. The second most important thing then after that is actually come up with a structure. So I always come up with some headings, and then I provide a brief idea of what I'm going to be talking about related to that heading, so that the client knows in advance what we're going to be talking about, how long that section is going to be. You can even put a word count and say, right, this introductory bit will be just 200 words. The whole document won't be longer than 1,200 words. That really sort of constrains you. And then as I'm writing it, obviously I'm researching, I'm pulling in stuff from the client's website and the materials that they've provided. I'm looking elsewhere to find out what research is out there, statistics, market analysis, all of those sort of things. And then I will really write it as I'm going along. And I often, write, what I'll do is I might write an introduction that's 300 words, knowing that it can only be 200. And then I'll go back and I'll delete some sentences or even incomplete paragraphs straight away, just because I've, again, myself wandered a bit too wide and maybe meandered about a bit too much. And I think, that's not necessary. So it's there's a lot of self-reflection as you're going through, saying, I'd love to talk about this, I'd love to highlight this, but I don't really need to. And you also have to assume that your audience actually knows. If you know what your audience knows, you can write in one sentence something, and they'll go, "Oh, I know what that means because I have that problem too." And you don't need a whole paragraph to explain what that means. So, yeah, that's the importance of understanding them. So, and I think the other thing is, when you're writing, what I also try to do is I try to finish an article on a day, in one day if I can. And then give myself time to come back and read it on a second day, maybe the next day or a bit later. because once you've walked away from it and you come back to it, that's when you see the mistakes. If you write it, try to copy edit it straight away, and then send it out all in one day, inevitably you'll read it again at another point and go, oh, that sentence doesn't read very well, or that doesn't make sense. I should have really edited that. So time is also an important aspect. Write it, leave it to, do its thing for a couple of days, and then come back and read it again before you send it to the client if you're in a content creator role.
Yeah, that would have been my next question, actually, if you have some rituals when you write these articles, because sometimes it could be very daunting but also exhausting to write these kind of technical articles. Like, is there anything else, like, except of stepping back and maybe revisiting afterwards, or like at a later point in time? Like, what else do you do? Are you listening to a specific type of music? I don't know, metal or like classic music?
No, so I work in an office on my own, so it's quite lonely. But I do keep the radio on in the background. I think the important thing is to have music playing. You can't be concentrating on researching information and writing if you've then got a podcast, a conversational podcast in the background. That doesn't work for me. What I find actually is because I live in Germany, German's my second language. I like to have the radio on in German, because for some reason my feeling is my brain is actually in two pieces. I have an English piece and a German piece, and I'm not distracted by German language in the background, like the news, for example. Whereas I would be if it was, English news. I might be more inclined to stop what I'm doing and have a little listen. So that's what works for me. The most important thing is the process. So what we try to do is we start by having a conversation with the marketing team. What is it that they want to talk about? The subject matter or SME interview comes next. So we try to have an hour's conversation or less with the person that knows everything there is to know about this particular topic. Really, really important if you can get it. But it's surprisingly, some people aren't able to provide very much, but is to get some PowerPoint presentations, some previous examples of material that they've done, just so that the tone of voice, what sort of things they talk about. The verbiage is also important. One of the biggest challenges for me is I'm quite happy writing about electronics and semiconductors, but if someone comes to talk to me about data centers and hard drives, and it does happen occasionally, I don't know what the term is for the person who runs the data center. Is it a data center manager? Is it the wizard of spinning platters? I need to ask that thing, because you need those nouns when you're writing, so as you can say who does what to this, or who is making the decision. Is it the project manager making the decision? Is it the system architect? Is it the head project lead? I don't know. So it's important to get that verbiage correct as well, and that comes out of those conversations. The next step is then sort of, as I said, creating that briefing document. You want to go out and find some basic research to give you an idea of what direction it could be, what the market opinion is, what the market size is for some things, because they might be valuable things to include. And then when it actually comes to writing, it's just sitting down and then drawing on all those things you've already prepared. The client's approved the brief. You've got all those URLs and PDFs and things that you acquired as research as you were preparing the brief. From that point, the actual writing bit then becomes quite easy, because at least for me, once I've done the briefing document and I know it's approved and everyone's happy with that basic thing, the story is already forming in my head. I don't know if it's the same for everybody, but I'm already starting to get a feel of what we're going to be saying, how we're going to be saying it, and how it's going to look. So the writing process then becomes relatively straightforward.
Yeah. Would you say it's harder to be an engineer learning the marketing bit, or being a marketer learning the technical bit?
It's a good thing. I think both sides find it difficult. I think engineers are typically very analytical, and I think they question why marketing's so complicated. It's like, well, we've got all this technical stuff. If you just tell people it's really, really good at this, everyone will believe you and just buy it. So, and then on the marketing side, obviously there's, as you know, loads of different challenges in terms of channels, in terms of promotion and activities that are going on, and you need to fill all those things with stuff, and part of that is content or messaging or whatever it might be for your trade fair stand. So I don't think, I mean, engineers and marketing are like oil and water. You don't really try to mix them, but I think we should make more effort to do that. I think both sides need to have a better understanding of the challenges they face. Engineers do move from engineering to marketing. Marketers, I don't think, move from marketing into engineering just simply because the years of skill that you need and training are require years to learn. So, but you do get marketers who understand pick up the basic tenets of what the company does and the value the solution has for customers. And I think really there needs to be a bit more respect between the two sides in many organizations, and there needs to be a bit more understanding about what's going on. So yeah, it's a challenge for a lot of people.
Yeah, I feel marketing is one of those subjects or topics that look very easy from the outside, but is incredibly complicated. Like, especially nowadays, it gets more and more complicated to actually become omnipresent in a market that's so crowded and so noisy.
Yeah, I think so. I mean, just to give you an example, I was working at one place, and this one person wrote to me and said, why aren't we doing print ads in newspapers? Because the readership of that newspaper aren't generally engineers. There is another company came to me once and said, we need to do more guerrilla marketing, and they sort of gave this B2C example where these people had sort of done some graffiti on pavements. I said, well, yeah, it's okay if you're selling, frappuccinos and your market is basically everybody walking up the high street and there's a place to buy it down the road. But if I'm promoting an electronics company, where exactly am I supposed to put that in order to get the number of eyeballs that, justify the cost of doing it? It's very difficult to see how it works. I agree. We need to have more creativity. We need better ideas in B2B marketing, and there are some companies out there doing some very creative and clever things. But typically the budgets also aren't there to do some of those things as they'd like to be done. And getting sign off for them is also difficult because it involves sticking your head above the parapet and looking different and maybe being a bit provocative in some cases. And many B2B organizations are run by engineers, or the founders were an engineer in the first place, and that's not their character, that's not their personality. So it's very difficult. But marketing people have a lot of challenges. There is just so many channels, so many ways of doing things. I think that the important thing is for B2B teams today is to look carefully at what's out there. And as I said, make as much use of data as possible. I don't want to be wed to the data. I don't think that people should make decisions solely data based. But when you are making a decision as a marketing team, rather than just winging it or going on stomach feel, at some point you need to say, right, how many people on the website, how many people clicked on that ad, even the customers that are contacting us through our website, how many people are saying that they saw us on a particular channel, because that is going to give you the guidance you need as to which ones are worth investing time and energy in.
Yeah, I have two last questions for you, Stuart, before we wrap it up. One being AI and marketing. How much do you use AI for technical marketing? Is it more like to create maybe some ideas of how you want to come up with a specific baseline or table of contents, for example? And do you have an advice on why not to use AI too much in your content creation process?
Yes, that's good. That's actually a very good question. The first one is obviously what comes up most. So yes, I do use AI, but I use it in different ways. I think if there's always this comment, if you go to a conference and say who here uses Linux, and like three people hold their hand up, and then they say, right, who here uses an Android phone, and everyone puts their hand up, or who uses Google, and everyone puts their hand up and said, well, you're all Linux users, aren't you? So I think we're all using AI in different ways. I use Grammarly, for example, to help me with my content creation, to get the grammar right, to get improve sentence structure and things like that. And that's AI based. So that's a tool based on AI which works well. I've used ChatGPT and Midjourney, for example, to try things out. My problem with ChatGPT as a general tool is that it makes a lot of mistakes, especially in niche areas. So if you're looking specifically on some of the challenges around, let's say, a silicon carbide MOSFET, or a GaN MOSFET or transistor, for power conversions and things like that, there's certain tricky elements of those. And when you ask ChatGPT, it doesn't actually know the answers, and it gets itself very quickly twisted. And if you then sort of dig deeper and say, okay, well, you said that, but are you sure about that? And does it apply to this technology as well? And it says, yes, it is. And so, oh no, I made a mistake. So I think as a general conversational tool, for our industry, it's not particularly good. But even when you're trying to use it for idea generation, it comes up with a list of things, and you look at it and you go, yeah, I was hoping for a little bit more creativity. So I think the creativity, that sort of sticking your head above the parapet element, is missing. It's not enough out there. Sometimes it can be very conservative, and it's no better than just sort of guessing at things with your mates down the pub. What I have tried out recently is developing a chatbot where you're feeding it with knowledge that you've created. So if you've got human created, curated content, like many blog posts, and you're focused on one particular topic quite closely, or I did another test one where I pulled in lots of stuff from the Bluetooth website about Bluetooth technology, combining the large language model, which is what provides a conversational element, with knowledge which 100% to be correct because you've created it. It is actually really, really good. And the nice thing about that as well is if you attach it to your blog, for example, you can actually get it to provide answers which are based upon information that you've provided in your blog, so it's accurate, correct. And at the same time, the thing that I'm often missing with ChatGPT, in the past at least, I may have changed, is that it can actually then provide a list of references. And that's really cool because you say, well, this is the answer to your problem. ESD is this problem, electrostatic discharge is this problem, transient voltage suppressor diodes are a good way of avoiding it. And here is some more information about that and how you might build that circuit. And I think that sort of helping process, that here's a brief sort of summary answer, and here's the place where you can find more information. I think that's an interesting future capability of ChatGPT and chatbots in general for B2B marketers with complex technical products. So really cool. That's my experience. In terms of the second part of the question, sort of disadvantages, I think the biggest problem is, and I've seen some articles where people have just said, yeah, write me an article on cooling systems. And it comes up with this stuff, and it's just dry and boring and dull. It's not engaging. It's clearly not written by a human, and that's a real shame because that's a disservice to the creativity and passion of an organization and all the people it represents. That's not the case. That's not what's there. So that's a shame. But another big area where I'm focusing on at the minute is video. Using subject matter experts as the source of a content creation strategy. So doing interviews like we're doing today, that video can then be sliced and diced in lots of different ways. And there's a platform called Kapwing, for example. You can take a long form interview like this will be when it's finished, and it uses AI then to sort of pull out little nuggets of information that could be interesting. And again, it's a good tool. It provides some good points, but the videos are too long, too wordy, maybe not compelling enough. But it's a good starting point. It's another help tool which allows you to at least find 5 or 6 videos which might float your boat. And once you've done that, you can go in and fine tune them.
Excellent. Last question, because I know you have to run, Stuart, is how do you upskill yourself on a daily basis? Do you take courses, participate in any cohorts, things like that, to make sure you're not missing, I don't know, the AI hype trend or whatever it is about marketing, maybe product marketing that you want to learn about?
Yeah, I've just been exceptionally busy of late and been restructuring what I do as well to move more into focusing on video. So I've not had a lot of chance for have any sort of structured learning or anything like that. What I do is download books which I find relevant onto my tablet and use Kindle to sort of read in the meantime, to learn about marketing strategies, marketing approaches, how to run a business based upon sort of expertise. LinkedIn provides a lot of information and background, and just generally using social media through curated channels that I've selected, also on Twitter, in order to find people and find out what's going on in the industry. Always trying to keep a hand in there. What topics are people finding interesting? How are they talking about them? How are they promoting them? And also, sort of forums as well, things like Discord. I found a few new forums on Discord, which are quite interesting, where you see what the challenges, especially student engineers, are having in order to, build projects. I was invited also as an expert to a project competition at university recently, and you get to see what they're struggling with. And that helps you to remain clear about audience need, audience desires, audience questions. So I think, all of those things together, a bit of listening to the audience and getting direct audience feedback, exploring, through reading and sort of LinkedIn as well, as to what other marketing challenges there are, and running this type of business as well, how to be successful. And also sort of speaking to my clients as far as possible to understand, what's working for them and what challenges are they having. So that's really, my approach to that.
Very cool. Super insightful, Stuart. First of all, thank you so much for this interview. I learned a lot, certainly. I hope the audience did as well. And if the guys have any questions, they can drop them in the comment section, and then hopefully you can follow up or answer them as well.
Yeah,
I will also put some relevant links in the description so people can check out your website, your podcast, all these things that you're also producing on a continuous basis. But yeah, again, thank you so much, Stuart. Looking forward to part number 2.
I really appreciate the opportunity to chat and share some of the things I've been up to and how we go about it.